an interesting session. David, why don't you read the poem that you would like to read?
Okay, thanks, Marty. First of all, I wanted to let you know that I will not be here next week because we're celebrating in Flagstaff the anniversary of the discovery of Pluto. And it's
Oh,
Pluto Planet Day up there, and I will be there. So I won't be here next week.
We
But I will be
actually,
here
we're
until
actually, we actually have a worship service next Saturday morning.
Yes,
Oh,
I was
okay.
going to say next
Right.
week we don't meet.
Well, I'll be in. I will be in Flagstaff then, but I'll see you all in 2 weeks.
Okay,
Okay.
David, you'll fulfill your obligation if you recite the Ten Commandments, because that's the Torah portion. Then you're set.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
Anyway, this quotation today is not astronomical, and I discovered it when Wendy and I were in Africa to see a total eclipse of the sun in June of 2001, a long, long time ago. And I was standing in line in the security line when I saw a poster that was framed and on the wall with this passage on it. And I was so moved by it, I got out of the security line and copied it down. It's by Henry Beston from The Outermost House. Creatures of the wild. We patronize them for their incompleteness, for their tragic fate of having taken form so far below ourselves. And therein we err, and greatly err. For the animals shall not be measured by man. In a world older and more complete than ours, they move finished and complete, gifted with extensions of the senses we have lost or never attained, living by voices we shall never hear. They are not brethren, they are not underlings, they are other nations caught with ourselves in the net of life and time, fellow prisoners of the splendor and travail of the earth. Thank you very much. And back to you, Marty.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi,
Thank you.
Ken. And how you doing? And Rabbi Mary, okay. Well, we are about a third of the way through the story of Balaam and his interactions with Balak, who is trying to get Balaam to curse the Israelites, but God has interceded, and Balaam can now only speak the word of God, and everything Balaam says is in praise of the Israelites. So, I so that's where we basically left off. And now we are on Numbers 24,
Numbers 24.
verse 1. Now, before we get started, I want to welcome back Rabbi Mary. Were you on a cruise?
No, it wasn't a cruise, it was a tour.
A
Yeah.
tour?
Yeah.
Okay. Where
yeah.
did you go?
El Salvador, Guatemala, and Belize.
Very nice.
Very
nice.
interesting. Yeah.
So you're now an expert on the Mayan culture.
Absolutely.
Okay. And they did astronomy too, didn't they?
Yeah, that's what they say. Yeah.
That's right. And their calendar, did
They
you?
had the calendar and they're still well and alive and they speak their own language and very interesting.
Yes, it is. It was studying their calendar that led me to reinterpret the Harvest Temple on my own and turn to someone who said, that's exactly what's in our books. The Chinese calendar was laying flat on the ground, and there were pillars all around at different distances and like that. And these was how the use of these was to track the moon and the visible planets. And the Harvest Temple there's a causeway there connecting the calendar with the temple itself. Okay, and it points south.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was interesting. Yeah.
But you look at the Chinese calendar when it's it's almost identical to the Mayan calendar.
Ah, no idea. Thank you.
Now, fast forward this to Machu Picchu and studying the Incas, and in the Larco Museum in Lima, they have a lot of different pottery by the Incas. And it's very interesting because they show the different cultures, one of which is very Asian, which is rather interesting. So there must be some interconnection. Okay. Their calendars are different. They wear them. Each one has his own calendar. And it's each knot in the strands from this necklace that they wear indicates their different experiences in their life. That was in the Inca culture. And David, their astronomy, their gods were based on the Milky Way, and the dark clouds represented their gods.
I was interested in how many of us besides me have visited Machu Picchu.
Yeah, it's a fascinating place.
It's well worth a visit.
That's right. And I don't know if anyone is aware of this, but when you look at the surrounding area, and I know I'm digressing from Torah study, but it's a phenomenal discovery has taken place outside of Machu Picchu. And all the mountains that are around there, they are now using radar. They study the area around there, and it's loaded with underground rooms and what they think will turn out to be temples and other passageways and like that, which is unbelievable. So Machu Picchu will probably will double in size at least. Yes, yes, Donna.
Just quickly on that subject, do you think it was underground because of war and stuff? You know, people coming in, other
I don't know. We can speculate.
Okay, that was
But
just
it may
curious.
have been built as a place of refuge in case of invasion.
That's what I'm thinking.
We
Yeah.
don't know. We just
Yeah.
don't know yet. We'll
Okay.
have to wait and find out what the archaeologists tell us. And likewise, the Mayan culture is expanding. The archaeology that's going on in the Middle East is also fascinating, and going back there, they're finding areas such as, and I mentioned this a few years back, in the the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. We have that, but there is a suspicion, again from archaeology, that a major meteor impact occurred to destroy those cities because they find tektites around the area. At one time, they thought tektites were just from volcanoes, but no, it's mainly from impacts of meteorites. So just wanted impacts from meteors. So I just wanted to mention that. And there is an exhibit of tektites at the Smithsonian. Okay, that has another story. Now let's get back to Torah. I'm sorry. but this is what happens in my head. I start connecting different
That would be
things.
that would be quite a an educational experience that we could propose to the program committee. Do an around the world tour. You know, get to start with the Mayans and then the Incas, and then go over to the Far East, and then eventually wind up in the Holy Land.
I love it. I love that idea.
But that's the way it really is, and even in ancient times.
Yeah, that's the intriguing part. Was there connection and communication between them, or were they all, so to speak, inspired around the same time to develop their own thinking and belief structures?
That the answer to that question is going to take a while.
Yeah.
That's all I could say. Anyway, why don't we start with our reading? We are on Numbers 24, verse 1. So if we have several people who enjoy reading, so I'm going to ask whoever is able to read first, just raise your hand. Okay, David, why don't you read verse 1 through the end of verse 9.
Yes,
Okay.
Marky, before we start, his name is Bilam.
Bilam,
Yeah, and it's confusing because of Baalak, but it's Bilam.
Bilam, okay.
Okay, here we go. And when Balaam saw that it pleased the Lord to bless Israel, he went not, as at the other times, to meet with enchantments, but he set his face toward the wilderness. And Balaam lifted up his eyes, and he saw Israel dwelling tribe by tribe, and the Spirit of God came upon him. And he took up his parable, and he said, the saying of Balaam the son of Beor, and the saying of the man whose eye is opened, the saying of him who heareth the words of God, who seeth the vision of the Almighty, fallen down, yet with opened eyes. How goodly are thy tents, O Jacob, thy dwelling places, O Israel, as valleys stretched out, as gardens by the riverside, as aloes planted of the Lord, and cedars beside the waters. Water shall flow from his branches, and his seed shall be in many waters, and his king shall be higher than Agag, and his kingdom shall be exalted. God, who brought him forth out of Egypt, is for him like the lofty horns of the wild ox. He shall lead up the nations that are his adversaries, and shall break their bones in pieces, and pierce them through with his arrows. He couched and lay down as a lion and as a lioness, who shall rouse him up. Blessed be everyone that blesses thee, and cursed be everyone that curseth thee.
Okay, well, David added lioness. This here is there's a specific reason for lion here rather than lioness. And we can go over that in a little bit later.
And
But
also
does
the
this
idea
sound?
that
Yes, what, David?
the idea that Matovu, the opening prayer of the service, of the morning service, is found here as well.
Correct. That's exactly, you took the words right out of my mouth. And
And yeah, the Matovu is, and speaking of Matovu, you may be interested that your own namesake, Leonard Cohen, when he was in Israel giving a concert there, the first thing that he did was the Matovu.
yes,
Right.
yes. And he's one of my favorite poets, and as you know, most people know him for the music, but I know him more for his poetry. He was laureate of Canada for a while, and Ma Tovu is very interesting, and uh, I'm going to ask the rabbis. Okay, they know more about the Psalms than I do. And when we speak of speak the words of Matovu, in the one of the uh, translations is, "How fair are your tents, O Jacob, your dwellings, O Israel," and that comes right out of Torah. But the rest of Matovu,
Yeah.
and we usually sing it, we enjoy singing it, is a little different. Now, the Psalms are written in different periods of time. They're not
Psalms, right?
the
Right.
Psalms, yes. And that comes after this statement in Numbers. And the second statement is and I'm doing an English translation, a suggested translation. I, through your abundant love, enter your house. I bow down in awe at your holy temple. And that's Psalm 5, verse 8. And since Rabbi Norman is shaking his head, I'm going to ask if he can expand a little bit on the author and the time in which that was written.
Well,
I'm putting you guys on the spot.
of which of the Psalms?
This psalm, five, Psalm 5, verse 8, because all these are
Right.
written in a time in which it's an expression of what is going
Yeah,
on
I mean,
in,
I
yeah,
to the best of my recollection, the earlier Psalms certainly are accredited to King David. Now,
King David. That's right.
I mean, that's the traditional source. Whether that's actually true or not, we don't know. Um, but it's in the time of the collection of the prayer book, the Siddur as we have it, which is about 1400 years old, that the additional phrases that are added on to the Matovu
Hmm.
are put together. I don't believe that those particular verses, if you will, go back much earlier than Rav Amram's Siddur or something like that.
Right.
I don't believe so. I could look it up, but it's still, legitimately historical and
Hmm.
traditional to include those. And as David said, Matovu is always considered the first of the public prayers or statements that are made as the minyan arrives. So there are personal prayers that we say at home or in the synagogue, but Matovu introduces the what they call the rubric of the service that is traditionally conducted in the presence of a minyan.
Yeah.
And what they do is they say that again, and we know it as literary style, we know it as parallelism, but the ohalecha, your tents,
Hmm.
refer to the homes, and mishkenotecha because it relates to Shekhinah, it relates to God's presence. So the mishkenotecha are the synagogues. So that's why
Yes.
this particular phrase, which brings us from home into the synagogue, is that's why it's put there at the beginning of the prayer book.
And the synagogue was also a house of learning.
Oh, of course,
And
and the
I
house
had
of assembly.
I had read that. Yes, this is what I had read, and I think it's a very interesting. It's a very interesting commentary.
Now, there is another, as long as we're talking about Matovu and rabbinic interpretations, there's actually a halacha that is derived from this. And it's difficult to exactly find where it is, so it must be related to the linguistic and the semantics of the time, but the halacha of maintaining the privacy of one's home is based on this. And what they say is that that's the main theme that Bilam was getting at. Was he looked at the tents, the dwelling places, and he saw that they were all placed in such a way that even with the open tent panel or the open door, one couldn't see into your neighbor's home. That you respected the privacy of your neighbor, and they built a halakha about that. I don't necessarily know if I've ever seen how they defended that coming, how they justified coming out of that phrase, but that is indeed the proof text for that. And if I may, I just want to say one more thing. Rabbi Miri is correct. The Hebrew is Bilam, but I rarely see, even from the most erudite of scholars, I rarely see the English written as Bilam. It's always written as Bal, even in the most recent translations, and I don't know why. The Hebrew, there's got to be something that I don't understand. We should bring Joel Hoffman back and
Yeah, Friedman does that as well. Yeah, and
the English always say Balaam or
Balaam. Yeah,
but the Hebrew is Bilam, and I don't know why all the scholars say that it's okay to write it differently or spell
Maybe it
it.
was just simply confusion. Then some people were saying Bilam and Balak, and maybe they were getting things mixed up.
I don't
know.
think so.
Maybe for you and I, who are what we call Amaratsis, that we are called the
Ignoramus, yeah.
I wasn't gonna say ignoramuses.
It's all right. It's all right.
Right, but even
Simple-minded.
the most advanced
Yeah.
scholars and translators, and it's curious. I don't know why.
Yeah. I think that more curious than that, I find the fact that we adopted as even the beginning of the prayers in the Siddur, something that I'm going to use the word goy as
Yeah, right.
explanation, is something that the goy said. Okay. Now, this is Miri doing something that I've been trying to tell someone, so now it's my opportunity. When we say, Ma tov u oalecha, how good is this? I'm saying that this statement was done by God, because I see it,
Yeah.
Ma tov u oalecha, Yaakov, umiskenatecha, Israel, is something saying, well, let me think how to put it, and then I'll come back to it. The whole thing that comes up now is beautiful poetry. And again, I don't know. I mean, well, the whole story of Bilam is a very nice Agadah, a very nice fairy tale with a donkey talking, etc. So the whole thing is poetry, and we need to hold it as such. with parallelism and metaphors and so forth. And I hope, I have not seen this for a long time, that in English they did that, because otherwise we lose a lot.
Okay. Well, as we had discussed, every time Bilam opens his mouth, he's really saying what God has told him to say.
Right.
That's right. So this is in part what God is saying, as you point out. Yes, Rabbi Norman.
Yeah, so there, if I may, there are two other interesting things just about this one. It's verse five, the Matovu. Okay. One is, not only is it important, and yes, curiously or with a pointed impression, as Rabbi Miri pointed out, that this is spoken by a Gentile. Maybe
Yes.
God's words, but the messenger, I
Yes.
hesitate to use the word prophet, but the messenger is a non-Jew or a non-Israelite. Not only is this considered the first public prayer in the Siddur, but in most, not all, but most Torah scrolls, again, as the sofer, as the scribe writes without punctuation or anything like that, it's anticipated so that Matovu will always be at the start of a column. It'll always be at the top of a line, a top line of a column. The mem for Matovu is always enlarged. Okay. And
Right, as a
in
result.
most present day Torah scrolls, let's say within the last 40, 50 years, okay, that they try to make it so that almost all of the columns start with the Hebrew letter Vav, except for Bereshit, except for the very beginning, and except for this mem of Matovu. Every other column begins with the Hebrew letter Vav. That's a stylistic calligraphy kind of thing that's amazing when you start to think about it. The other thing that I wanted to point out is, give me two other quotes that almost everybody is familiar with that have that word ma in there, and how do we translate them? How do we translate it when we see them?
How much?
How about Passover?
Manishtana halala hazeh.
Yeah.
Ma nishtana, and how do we translate that for the four questions?
Why is this night different
Right.
from all
Why? Okay. Ma is why there. Ma nishtana. Okay. And
Yeah.
what's the other one from Psalm 133, which admittedly, Marty, is written by a different author than Psalm 5. But Psalm
Okay.
133, Hine ma.
Matovu.
Okay. How, I just gave it away. How do we translate ma in Hine ma tov? Behold,
Good.
how good it is and how pleasant. So the word ma is a very powerful and can be used, let's say, educationally, pedagogically, in different ways. So you could make matovu alecha, how are the tents of Jacob different? How are they good? All right. Why are they good? And so the commentators and the rabbis throughout the generations have played all kinds of interesting sessions with just retranslating that ma tovu in light of manishtana, in light and there are other examples throughout the Torah and the other literature too.
That is very interesting in and of itself, because you can see it changes. If you take each one of those questions, you have a totally different story that follows.
Of course.
That's right.
Right.
Fascinating.
You do do the same. Just think, and we can bring it back up again in a couple, in 2.5 months. But with Manishtana, is it,
Yeah.
why is this night different? Is it how is this night different? It is what is different about this night
Yeah.
compared to Mikol Halelot? Is that from all the other nights of Passover? Is that from all the other nights of the rest of the year? Is that Manishtana Halayla Hazeh? Is it what is different about this Passover night than any other Passover night you might have celebrated? Great word.
This could be a fascinating Passover service
Yeah.
instead of reading through
Yeah,
each
I did.
one.
A fellow who teaches, actually, I think now he's retired and his son has taken over. A fellow by the name of Noam Sion. I don't know. Miri, did you ever
No,
study with Noam Sion? He taught
no,
at the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem and at Hebrew University. Um, he wrote a Haggadah, and actually he did. I think he did his either a PhD or some other kind of research that was based on that notion of what can we do to make this Seder different than any other Seder we've
mm,
experienced before.
Very interesting. A number of years ago, I was conducting a Seder at our home, and uh, we got to the four questions, and believe me, I did not know this aspect of it. And I said, I'm going to put everything aside. And now I want you to either, you have a choice. You can either say why Passover is meaningful to you, or pick some page in the Haggadah and read it, and then say what it means to
Sure.
you. And that was so we turned that Seder into a totally different meaning, basically. And it was so, but I didn't know what I was doing.
If
Now I
anyone
have
wants to look, if
justification.
anyone wants to look it up, Noam Sion, but Zion is how he spells it in English.
Okay, right.
And the Haggadah and the research, there's a companion volume is called A Different Night.
Okay.
yeah. Now, going back to Matovu,
Thank you.
this is what I wanted to point out as I look at it in a different way. How good your tents are, Yaakov, question mark.
Right, right. Is it a question?
Hmm.
Your tabernacle, Israel? So then the answer is by Yaakov and by Israel, because the next sentence is, how tov they are? They spread like palms, like gardens by
Right.
a river. So he's quoting it as the question is to them. And then there is a description, godliness description. And we know that there are not question marks in the Torah, so we can put them anywhere we want. So, yeah, that's what I wanted to.
That is really, I'm as my historic jargon for learning something that's really cool. It could be hep now, or whatever. But it really is a very interesting commentary, Rabbi. Thank you, both of you. Thank you very much. Um, but it's a fascinating discussion about this. Any other commentaries about what we are reading? I mean, we can talk about. I know Rabbi Plaut. For those of you who have the book on page 1179, it talks about some of the aloes, which we know it's added to a lot of aromas for various bombs and like that in the drug industry, but also is used for perfume. And cedars we've discussed before.
Incidentally, Marty,
Yes,
the Hebrew that they're translating as aloes,
in verse 6.
right, is the same. And this is another interesting thing, is the same three-letter root as the tense, ohel or ahal. Okay.
Ah,
Okay.
And when you play around with the letters and you move them around a little bit, you get Eloha, you get God, you get gods.
oh,
So,
hi, yeah, that's right.
yeah. So,
Uh, you're doing something that the Chabad they like to do that many times.
oh, well, they're not the only ones.
That's right. No, no, I mean they talk about that. Uh, so do those words then have some in gematria? Would they have the same numeric?
They would have the same numerical base value.
Right,
The next step in gematria is when you start adding and subtracting,
right, right.
in a particular order. So that would change.
Okay, but just rearranging the letters, they would still have the
Also,
same.
it would add up to the total.
Right, right. Okay. So, any other? Yes, Amy,
Can you hear me?
we hear
Yes.
you loud and clear.
I wonder, Rabbi Norm, what is the origin of Gamatra? I mean, how did that begin? What is that based on?
Kabbalah. What
Mary, what'd you say?
I said in Kabbalah they use that
Yeah.
a lot. Yeah,
Yeah, well, actually, it predates
predates
the
Kabbalah.
movement, the Kabbalah movement.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, um, I don't know exactly when it began, but my guess is it began as I guess I would call it an educational game, like
Yeah.
mnemonics,
Yeah.
different ways to try to remember spelling or a particular word or something like that. By by the seventh, eighth century, when you started having collections of the main commentators on the Bible, there are already two or three of the, not as well known as a Rashi or an Ibn Ezra or a Barbanel or Maimonides, but there are already some of the commentators who start doing some numerical things, like this word, this word for the burning, if you add up the letters of burning bush, you'll find that it's the same, it's the same numerical equivalent as some other time where God's voice is or presence is felt by someone. They'll start to do those kind of things as validation. But I think originally it must have started as a way of just to try to remember that or try to look for the teacher standing up and saying, okay, who can find a hidden meaning in the word chai, something like that, or
Right.
the
Right.
word yad, or something, right?
And by the way, this is why, in part, some of it, some people have looked at Kabbalah as being mystic,
Sure.
having mystic interpretations and like that. This
Right.
is one aspect of it.
If the assumption is that the gematria and the numerical equivalents are all part of God's plan in either writing or inspiring or dictating the Torah text, that God then caused those numerical equivalents to be there.
Thank you. That's interesting. Yeah.
If anyone, there is a movie made about this
Uh-huh.
subject, and it involves computers. Okay, and the title of the movie is the Greek letter pi. Okay, it's not Life of Pi, it's just pi. Okay, and it talks about a computer specialist and programmer and interactions with Kabbalah. Okay, and it's interesting. It's just a very interesting movie. Yes, yes, Suzanne.
Um, just another comment. The New Testament was written in Greek, which also
Hmm.
has gematria associated with the letters. So I don't think it's a coincidence that the entire scripture has uses alphabets with gematria. I do think there is very specific meaning, and it's for us to figure it out.
Mhm.
I'm not
There's-
saying that we figured
There's
it
a
out,
lot of
but
it done. There's a lot of it done with the book of Daniel, for example, which has a lot of Aramaic, which is a combination of the Hebrew and the Greek. And
oh, right, right. You're right. I
there's
forgot
a
about
lot of
that.
it with Daniel.
So it's just an interesting take on things. That's all.
Well,
Any other
Pat wants to
comments?
say
I
hi.
mean, we've really gone all over the spectrum of things. Any other comments?
Marty, this is
Oh,
Kent.
okay, Kent, and then Amy. Okay.
I have just a question. So in the section that David read, and beginning on line 6,
Okay.
where it's similes, there is like palm groves that stretch out, like gardens, like aloe,
Mm-hmm.
like cedars. Okay, so here was a people on the move, and I'm like, well, where might they have had either time to grow those things where they likely didn't, or where would they have experienced them? And then I'm thinking, well, maybe it's just they would have seen them and known of them from the time of enslavement in Egypt, right? Because they may have had, they were serving these others. And then down on line 8, shortly thereafter, is God who freed them from Egypt, right? Um, so am I reading that properly? Like it's really just, uh, projecting how he views their encampment as something sweet and healthy and fruit bearing and so forth? Or actually, did he view that and say, huh, wow, you have all these things?
All right. I'm going to first ask if anyone else has an idea about your question. If you look at these as phrases in the terms of an adjective, each one representing an adjective as to how, or a phrase, how you would describe someone who you love. Okay. This is almost written as an ode.
Correct.
Okay. And so it's in praise of, it's almost like a parent talking about their child in terms that to which you can relate.
To someone who would understand the analogy to
Yes,
those things.
yes.
Okay.
And so if you think of an oasis, Okay. All the references here could also, everything you would think of as an oasis in the desert is
Correct.
being addressed here.
And
Mhm.
So it's beauty and sustenance.
Thank you. Rabbi Mary? Good.
Yes, Rabbi Mary.
well, I'm asking you, Ken, I don't know if you know my way of thinking, but do you know how the description of the Garden of Eden came about?
Mm.
No. So why didn't you ask then? It's what we're talking here, in my mind, is not something that it's a reality, that's a description of looking at something and describing it. So you ask, how did they know that it was that, and how do they get to these descriptions? As I said at the beginning, this is poetry. And when who asked what, I don't remember, who wrote these, or Psalms are these? Uh, it's, it's not about, I know what it is because in the future I'm going to see it. How do I know that that happens? I've been in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, it's all desert. How would I know about water and so forth? So if you take it as a plot of a story, then those questions might be not a plot. If you're talking a journalist describing something, it's not what it is. It's like the Song of Songs, in which descriptions come from some beauty that it doesn't matter if they saw it in Egypt or not, or comes from the mind of someone. Um, that's my way of looking at it. We say, and the rabbis say, there's no first and last in the Torah. It's not a consequential thing. So seeing this as a sequential thing, we have several problems. So that's my way of looking at it. I'm trying to parallel this, and maybe David can help me, of a poetry that describes things that they've never seen.
Mhm.
Uh,
Well, thank you for that. And that makes good sense. Actually, it may make perfect sense. And it's that Bilam is really addressing Balak,
Right.
who he's not addressing the Israelites per
That's
se.
right.
And that makes all the difference. Okay,
and the voice
thank you.
of God comes through his voice. If you
Correct.
look, so God knows everything. So
You remember the old, first commandment to of speakers. Know thy audience.
Yeah.
I've
So you're right. You're right. Bilam is speaking to Balak in terms that he can
You
understand, he
understand.
can
Yeah.
Right.
relate to.
right, got it. All right, thank you.
But then
Thank you
it
for the
becomes,
indulgence.
the lovely imagery, as Rabbi Miri is saying, the lovely imagery for the Israelites to remember. You certainly remember when people praise you, right? It's a lot easier to remember that.
Yeah.
Yes, Amy.
Well, I have a question. Susan mentioned something that I found very interesting. She mentioned the book of Daniel, which has a lot of prophecy in it. She also mentioned the New Testament having gematria, and I didn't even know that. But thinking of the book of Daniel, if you get into prophecy, I would think gematria could be very instrumental in prophecy. And I wonder, how it plays, what significance it must play in prophecy.
Suzanne?
This comment really is just for Amy, and maybe it's a little bit of a sidebar, but Amy, I'm sure you're aware in the book of Revelation that the mark of the name of the beast is 666.
666, right.
Well, in studying the very early church fathers, like Polycarp, Polycarp is the one. He was taught by John, the Apostle John, and he had asked about that particular line 666, and he recorded that the 666 is not in Hebrew, it's in Greek. And so the name will translate into 666 through Greek, not through any other language. And I think that's something that not too many people are aware of. And I thought that you would find that interesting, because I know I did.
It is interesting, and when those three numbers come to mind, I avoid them.
Like the plague, I know.
Yeah, no,
I
really, because it speaks the most evil that one can even imagine, come face to face with.
Yeah, if I'm
And
playing a game and in the scoring, 666 comes up. I mean, it's just really a number, but it freaks me out, and I have to
yeah,
play more to get rid of it.
well, I was
Okay.
playing a game the other day on the computer, and I wanted to make a move, but if I made the move that probably would have won me the game, the number would have come up 666, so I didn't do it. I
I
couldn't do it.
understand.
Don't think of it as 666. Think of it as recon 6, which is 18. And then you got a powerful Jewish number. There you go.
And the other number that freaks me out, although not quite as much, is 444. Yeah, 3 4s. Because somewhere along the way, and this I'm not sure of, but it stuck in my mind that somewhere along the way somebody said that represents Satan. So that when I see that number, that also freaks me out.
Okay.
But not as much as 666.
Yeah,
By the way, there was a highway in western New Mexico that was labeled 666. Highway 666, and it is no longer 666 because of the severe number of accidents that occurred on that highway.
I can believe it.
And but just so they changed the name. I do not know if they still have the high number of accidents.
I know that
Why not?
Airlines will never use 666 as a flight number.
That's right. That's right.
It's
Well,
kind
The same as the number 13 or things.
Right.
yeah, you don't
Right.
put 13 on the
Right.
floor of a
But
building.
on another side, I wanted to get back to what I was getting after with poetry, and that is the words simile. You want something like this, like that, to create an image in the other person's mind who's reading that. So Myron Cohn, many years ago, had I'm only going to select two lines from his speaking about a beautiful lady that he had met, and he was saying, "Your eyes are like rubies; they are bloodshot. Your teeth are like stars; they come out at night." Okay, so it was his way of making this into a parody. This use of like this or like that. So anyway, uh, any other comments about what we've been reading? Okay, let's go on then to, if somebody would kindly read, oh, well, this is a long one. Okay, why don't we do this? Why don't you read verses 10 through the end of 14? Okay? Whoever would like to read. Oh, yes, go ahead, Dawn. Donna.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Enraged at Balaam, Balak struck his hands together. I called you, Balak said to Balaam, to damn my enemies, and instead you have blessed them 3 times. Back with you at once to your own place. I was going to reward you richly, but the Lord has denied you the reward. Balaam replied to Balak, but I even told the messengers you sent to me, though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold. I could not of my own accord do anything good or bad contrary to the Lord's command. What the Lord says, that I must say. And now, as I go back to my people, let me inform you of what this people will do to your people in days to come.
Oh,
He took up his theme.
well, why don't we just stop at that point,
Oh,
and
sorry.
then we'll go on because this is an extra.
Yeah, that's fine.
The any comments about what we just read? Thank you, Donna, for that. And it
I have a question. What is the 3 representative of 3 times? That comes up.
well, there are we go through it. You missed the other 2 sessions where we
Oh,
were
earlier ones.
okay.
Sorry. Okay.
Bilam is requested by Balak to come and to come to his court and curse the Israelites.
Oh, okay.
And so this is the 3rd time that and it's all in poetry. This is the 3rd time that it would be it occurs where there's praise each time, even though Balaam wants, uh, uh, yeah, Balaam is asked by Balak to curse the Israelites 3 times, and they go from station to station, if you will, and each time Balaam thinks that if the curse is said in different locations, okay, they'll have sacrifices and everything to make the curse come true. But each time Balaam has spoken, it doesn't come out as any curse. It's only in praise, and he's speaking, and God has made Balaam only speak words of that God wants him to say. Okay, and that's why the discussion this time. I realize you missed a few sessions, so that's why. And by the way, yes, Rabbi.
No, it's okay. Finish your thought, Marty. It's all right.
Okay. Uh, this is one of the so the numbers. I was just going to say, the number 3 comes up in multiple ways in this story. And so it was interesting. So I did a little reading about the number 3 in gematria, and it means harmony. So the way this story is going to end, sort of end, we'll see how it all leads to a situation of harmony. Now I'll let anybody else. I just threw that in to make people think about things. Yes, go ahead, Rabbi.
So I noticed Donna, who was reading, and I have the same translation. And at the end of 14,
Mm-hmm.
the Hebrew seems to be in the end of days. Okay, that this will come about, that what this people, meaning Israel, will do to your people, meaning Moab, in now this translation says in days to come, but the Hebrew is definitely in the end of days. So is it, is it is it in the coming days? Is it soon? Or is it, eschatological in in the end of days kind of thing? Different translations, and I don't know what the justification is. The Eitz Chaim says not the end of days, but the near future from the speaker's point of view. I don't know how they come up with that. Acharit hayamim is a typical phrase that means the end of days, not in the coming days.
Huh.
But Rabbi Norm, you're right, that we see Ba'acharit Hayamim as the end of days, but we use this person kam me'uchar, which is after,
Yeah,
that came late.
after meaning sooner.
Right. Well, it came late, Me'uchar is that it's not at 3 o'clock, it came at 3:30. So
Yeah,
it's, yeah, so it's difficult to, it's the same shoresh, it's the same root, but yeah, usually acharit is when the Mashiach come, kind of thing.
right. No, I mean, whenever I can remember seeing that phrase, it's always referred to, a long time away,
Yeah.
as opposed to what this translator is saying in the coming days. And I just didn't know if I was missing some kind of a hint somewhere that it's coming sooner rather than later. I mean,
Well,
there are the phrases that the Israelites were all familiar with. I don't know if Balak was familiar with, but those who bless you will be blessed, those who curse you will be cursed. I mean, all those kind of phrasing. But then you throw in Acharit Hayamim means it's a long way off.
yeah.
If I can comment, this is Kent. And Rabbi Norm used the word hints, what hints. And I pick up a couple of hints in line 14 where Bilam says, let me inform you of what this people will do to your people in days to come. Well, he's speaking to Balak
Right.
directly.
Right.
Okay. And it's not, his words were not the words from Hashem's mouth speaking. He says, well, let me tell you what happened from what he believes will happen. So it's your people. So it would be in his lifetime. So this gets to, was it, the end of days and this concept of when the world, changes dramatically, but in his lifetime, in the days to come. To me, that's the other hint of, you put them together, it's like sooner than later. And it's not a pretty picture, right? That he
Right.
paints.
Right.
At any rate, it's just
No,
my
I mean,
take, but only from the English.
I think that English phrase I think is much more pertinent, sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
coming, it's coming, yeah. The other thing I wanted to
Oh,
mention is,
excuse me,
and
Mary, Rabbi Mary. Suzanne has had her hand up
sorry,
for a while now.
That's okay. I just have a question. Could somebody refresh me on what kingdom or territory that Balak
Moab.
reigns? Where?
Moab. He's a Moabitess.
Oh, he's the Moabite.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Okay. Okay, Rabbi Mary.
Okay.
Um, I don't know if you spoke about it in the previous sessions that I wasn't here, but we know that only prophets could hear the voice of Adonai. And here, Bilam talks, he said, well, I cannot say other things because this is what God tells me to say. So there is a deep connection, I think, between Bilam, who's not an Israeli, is not part of us, hearing the voice of God. Any comments on that one?
Okay, does anyone remember what we had this discussion 1, 2, and 3 weeks ago?
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead,
think
Ken.
going back to the portions we read last week which was at least the second time that he had observed a corner or a portion of the Israelites as they were encamped. He also spoke to how I think they used the lion metaphor and would devour, the opponents and those that stood in their way. So he's already had gotten that message from God about what the Israelites will do to those who try to stand in their way.
Yeah, but my point is more hearing the voice of God. This is not something that happens all the time. We were talking about Moses, hearing the voice of God, having what I call a red phone directly. And prophets have that. Not any Bilam, not even one of us. The way that we connect with God is in a dream, in a chazon,
Vision.
in a vision. And here is, it's a direct, he is saying the way of God, and for that, he needs to hear the word of God. So, and what we say is that prophets later on were able to do that. So that was struck me as a unusual.
Sure. It is, and we had a discussion about it in the previous weeks. So let me get the hand. Donna had her hand up first, and then Amy, and then I wanted to say, I just in case it had come up again, found, oh, here we go again. In covenant and conversation, Rabbi Sachs addresses this issue. So we can, if we can go and discuss that. So, Donna, what did you
No,
want?
go ahead, Amy. I'll just listen.
No, go ahead.
Oh.
I always like to do it that way first.
Okay, well,
because
I'm new
we
at all
always
this.
have
so-
important things in the group that we.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that too. No, I was thinking, I know that it's not part of our religion to go out and recruit, right?
Correct.
Okay, so, but having him be not an Israelite, could this have been a way to for it to go from kingdom to kingdom about this God that the Israelites have? Or why would
Well, let's put
I
it
was
into
just
the context of the story.
okay?
Okay. Uh,
But the question from
Bilam or Balaam in the book that you read from uh, is a seer. People go to him,
yeah,
okay, to be able to predict the future, to be able to do things for them, you know, to lay a curse on someone or to bless someone. So he has a lot of power. And then in the story of the ass,
yeah,
okay, that's when he learns that God is going to, you know, he can only talk about, you know, say the words of God.
okay, yeah, okay.
Okay,
I remember
yes,
that.
opens his eyes. Okay, that he's been blind all this time as to where his good fortune comes from. And he always is, and because of this, uh, he's now being hired for payment, okay, to come and curse the Israelites. So we had a discussion back then about what is the difference between this seer and a true prophet. Okay. Now, in this situation, God has told him that from now on, he can only speak the words that God puts in his mouth. And it's only for this story, it's not forever. Okay, so it's almost like he's been made an angel, if you will, just to do this task. I don't know. Yes, Rabbi, your hand is
Yeah,
up.
we're not the first Torah study class to
That's right.
have this discussion or debate. Is he a legitimate prophet or whatever? There are in the Talmud there are those who say that yes he was and even raise Bilam almost to the level of a Moses, that that his message is just as important. Then there are others that go farther left than where we are, saying that Bilam is a total fraud and that he's only in it for the money and he'll say whatever anyone tells him to say. Um, I think, Marty, I think the word that we were looking for more than seer from a couple of weeks ago is spokesman.
Okay.
Okay, is that we saw him more as a spokesman, and indeed the introduction in Hebrew is not that it says when Bilam speaks, the Hebrew word is neum, which is a speech, not a prophecy, not a message, but it's like a prepared speech. Somebody else gave him the script, and he's reciting that. So that's kind of the context that we seem, doesn't mean that ours was the only, but that's the way that, at least from a couple of weeks ago, that I remember our consensus was.
So what was the Hebrew word you used?
Neum.
Ne'um.
Neum in Hebrew, nun aleph mem, is like a speech as
Okay.
opposed to a prophetic message.
Okay. Uh, what I'd like to, okay, Amy, I always do it first. Go ahead, you speak first, and then I'm going to come back to what the rabbi mentioned. That was very important.
I have a question for Rabbi Miri. Rabbi Miri seems surprised that God might speak through a goy, but I look at it a little differently because God spoke through donkeys,
Mm-hmm.
and if he can speak through a donkey, he can speak through someone who's not Jewish.
Anything.
you're not relating non-Jews to donkeys, are you?
No, thank you very much for that
Right.
insight, but
Okay.
no.
Well, he
But
can
some
not
are
only do it,
S's,
he can
and
not
I
only do it
acknowledge
through a
that.
donkey, he can do it through a bush, a burning bush.
And a serpent, and
And that's
right,
right.
Yeah.
right. Okay.
That's right. So, so
The
if
highest.
so that's okay. But there's something that I was reading about Bilam, and in Rabbi Sachs has a slightly different take on this. And I'm going to, it's lengthy, but I think it's worth reading because it ties together certain things like we always do in Torah study. And he centers his discussion around, and I'm going to begin reading now. The Hebrew word emuna is usually translated as faith
Emunah with an E.
with an E, emuna.
Emunah.
Emunah, like amen.
In the Middle Ages, it came to have the connotation, as in the summary of Maimonides' principles printed in most Sidurim after the morning service. Ani ma'amim be'emunah
Lema.
shalema. I believe with perfect faith. But in Tanakh, it does not have that meaning. It is not a cognitive term, but a moral one. The concept of brit, covenant in the Torah, whether between two or more human beings or as at Sinai between a nation and God, excuse me, means a mutually binding pledge. Two parties undertake responsibilities to one another. They agree to join their destinies. The key virtue in an ethic defined by covenant is loyalty. Being true to your word, trusting the other person or nation or God to be true to his, and acting in such a way as to honor that commitment. Emunah means faithfulness, solidity, reliability. It means not walking away from the other party when times are tough. Emunah, in short, means loyalty. That is what Balaam lacked. In the end, not only in the religious life, but in life as a whole, moral qualities count for more than intellectual or even spiritual ones. There are all too many people blessed with great gifts who somehow achieve less than they hoped or others expected. Cleverer than other people, they tend to look down on others. They lack the basic qualities of human solidarity. What they do brilliantly, but often they do the wrong things. They even commit crimes because they are convinced that they can get away with them. Knowing how quick they are and knowing how quick they are and how slow others are to understand, they become to believe that they themselves can do wrong without anyone else noticing, or at least identifying them as the culprit. And I'm going to skip over some of this. He says that this is what Balaam was like. So in a day-to-day basis, all that Balaam can do is tell people what they may want to hear. Okay. But Rabbi Sachs goes on, but the Torah is about more than merely abstract principles and universal truths. It is also about the concepts of marriage and the family, a people, its history, a nation, and its destiny. It's more than just a religious tradition. It is about Judaism and the universality of justice, but the particularity of love. And he goes on, and so what matters in the long run is not what gifts we have, but how we are going to use them. We cannot choose the gifts we have. That is partly a matter of genetics or luck or fate or providence, divine providence. But we can choose what we do with them. Balaam lost the high reputation he might have had because he lacked a basic commitment to moral principle. He was accepting money for his capabilities. A prophet without loyalty is not a prophet. A person without loyalty is not a mensch. So he talks about it from that standpoint. Now you can argue to have a different opinion. That's okay.
And my point was, Amy,
Yeah.
not if God speaks to others than what you guys call Israelites and I call us, because I'm an Israelite as well.
Mhm.
So it's not that, my point was not that God probably speaks to everyone that believes in God. But my point is that we establish that God speaks, God speaks, people will have a vision or people will have a dream. That's how there is a direct communication between humans and God. And here we have someone who comes to curse and is not part of Israel, and he has communication with God. So it's not a dream, it's not a vision, it's hearing like Moses. That was my question, how someone that's not defined as a prophet in our tradition can do that, or is able to do that, or God is able to do it, wherever you see it anyway. That was my point.
Thank
And
you. You answered the question I had.
yeah,
Yes. Yes, you did. Very good. Yes, Rabbi.
Although I just want to point out, not to disagree certainly with Rabbi Sachs of beloved memory and Lichot Harav, but we also did note that there were some rabbis and some of the scholars in the ancient world who read into some of the encounters that Balaam had and saw that as a conversion and saw that as him becoming, him accepting the God of the Hebrews as his God also. And so that he does go through this change of his loyalty and and whatever. But I'm not so sure that I accept that. But there is that strain in
yeah.
the literature.
But to answer another answer, again, I'm from Rabbi Sachs, just one sentence. Balaam is the most unlikely messenger, but the one who delivers the most beautiful message.
Beautiful is right.
So he just is just pointing to different aspects of this discussion too. And so how do we know if somebody, if we hear a voice or don't do that. How do we know that we really shouldn't do that? Or should we, say, well, what about this? I can get it. Okay, and then we blame it on the devil. Well, the devil made me do
Right, yeah.
it. Go ahead, Rob.
666 and 444, whatever. I can only, it's one of those eternally discussable questions, but the
Sure.
classic answer to that, well, there really are two, but one is not really satisfying. The first one is if the prophecy comes true. Okay, but
Mhm.
if you're kind of impatient and you don't want to stick around to wait to see if it's going to come true, the more classic and I think the more viable answer, Marty, to know whether the message is true, is faithful, and whatever, is when we listen to the still small voice within us.
Within, yes.
That's the classic answer. That the message has to be both external and internal, and they have to agree.
I agree with you because it's so modern. It's so contemporary. It's so what's going on these days. I
Yeah.
told you so, you know.
Well, another way to look at this is that your conscience is God whispering to you.
Yes,
That's a very good
yes,
way of
Right,
putting it.
yes,
right.
Uh,
absolutely.
uh, the Kabbalists also used to speak of well, they still do, of what is it, the Yetzer
Yeah.
Tov and the
Yetzer
Yetzer
Hatov and
Hara.
Yetzer Hara, right.
Right.
That and you see it in cartoons all the time.
Sure.
The good angel and the devil sitting on your shoulder.
Right.
Which one are you going to listen to?
The one
And
that you feed.
and this is
Good point.
there's no good answer. And so maybe you need a little of the Yetzer Hara, the devil, to go out of the box. Not too far, otherwise you could get in trouble, but a little bit out of the box so you can look back and see what's going on inside the box. Who
But
knows?
what you say,
Who knows?
Marty, from Sachs, which I'm grasping and accepting, is the issue of faith. And as
Yes.
Rabbi Norman said, faith is a very inner quality, a very,
Hmm.
stuff thing. Yes. Yeah. And faith is a very difficult, it's trusting yourself, your inner
Yes.
conscience that Amy.
As Amy said, yeah, it's very good. Any other discussion? And then we can read what is going to be happening in the days to come. Kent, you're muted.
I'm sorry. You got me?
Yep.
Okay. On the item of loyalty that Rabbi Sachs wrote up, and I do not have that
Mm-hmm.
text, so I can't refer to it. Um, as you interpret it, was Rabbi Sachs in essence saying that Bilam was disloyal to Balak?
Yeah, well, he's questioning. God speaks to him several times.
Uh-huh.
Balaam goes to sleep on it, and he comes up with a different way of doing it the next day. And he's always giving an excuse. Well, though God told me not to go, I'll go and maybe I'll get a reward for going. And this happens a third time, up to, two times. And then the third time, he runs into the problem with the ass. And it takes another 3 episodes with the ass banging into, doing things,
Right.
Going down and not going further because he sees whether it's God or God's messenger, and he bangs bangs into the
Mhm.
wall. And then God opens up the ass's mouth, and says, what are you treating me? Why are you treating me this way?
Mhm.
Now, is it the ass saying that? Or is it God saying, why are you treating me this way? And if you look at it from that standpoint, God's saying, why, if I've given you all these powers, why are you not recognizing that it's coming from me?
Okay.
It reminds me the story of Jonah.
Yes, it's another version. That's right.
You cannot run away.
So it's one of these things. It depends on which way you want to interpret, the story.
But both could be correct, Marty.
They all can, and they can all.
Yeah.
That's right. You can come up with your own interpretation as well. But it's worthwhile to at least recognize that there are multiple ways of looking at scripture.
Okay. Well, one thing as I see it, and I'm glad Rabbi Murray mentioned the Jonah story. I was thinking of that, but from what I've read here, there's a significant difference between the book of Jonah story and this, and that is in Jonah, as I recall, God said, "You shall say this." You go and then you express it. In this, it's God speaking through him. He is saying God's words as they're coming out of his mouth. That's
Yeah, it's
how.
like that's right.
And it just seems to me that Balak didn't have any choice.
That's
And
right.
once
Lamb, you mean? Yeah.
once he committed to, let's call it a contract or an obligation to Balaam, he was going to give it every effort, but he was going to fail in each effort. He didn't necessarily know it at the start of each of the three kind of observations and sessions and then speak. But at the end of the day, at the end of the third time, it's like, hey, let me tell you something else. This is going to happen to you, because he himself then was convinced. But I don't think he was, we're talking about loyalty, I guess, to God. I don't think he was disloyal to Balak. It doesn't appear to me. He was simply giving him news he didn't want to hear, and he had no control over that. That's my take on it.
Okay.
And
Yes.
like lots of leaders, Balak was offended by it.
Well,
Fired him.
he's trying to either be sure that he still gets paid or that Balak will not kill him. Let's put it that way. Yes, Rabbi.
So you know who's missing from the story is the children of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
What are they listening to this? Are they witnessing to this? Are they totally, ambivalent? Do they even know that it's going on? And that's curious to me that there's no reference whatsoever.
That's right.
Now, when we get into the next chapter, we see a reaction from the people.
That's right.
But at this point in time, hey, listen to that guy. Wow, he's saying such nice things about us, or, yeah, go, da, 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 or what's going on, or, or who is it? I don't know. It's the kind of thing that if we were back at camp working with the bar mitzvah kids or the teenagers, we would say, okay, let's fill in the blanks. Let's write a midrash. What's happening to the children of Israel while this is going on?
Right.
What are they doing? Are they supporting this?
Bibliodrama. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Well, this is the first good word they've heard from another outside source.
Other than Jethro, yeah. Right.
Right, well, Jethro at the beginning, but now you're dealing with a whole bunch of people who weren't around to hear Jethro.
Right.
And so, uh, so this is a new generation, and so maybe maybe this whole story is that it's going to end in a peaceful way at that point in time. But maybe it's these people and the ass are being used as tools to to answer your question. It doesn't necessarily have to come always through God. It can be from any source.
Mm-hmm.
Words of encouragement to be, you can still do this. You're magnificent and everything. So maybe God is taking that approach. I will do it through an outsider to tell the Israelites how great you are.
Despite all the criticisms and despite all the
And all your complaining
right,
and everything else
and
that we've
all
been
that.
reading about,
Right.
all the horrors that you've
So
had to endure.
when push comes to shove,
Right.
Matovu ohalecha, how good you are.
And I know Michael used to talk about the Holocaust, but you had two people come out of it, and one saying that those who truly believed got through the Holocaust still believing that there is a God.
Yeah.
Another side takes it God is dead, and as another way of looking at it, and the philosophy and the poetry is more distraught. You know, that man is not as good as he thinks he is because of the horrors that he can do. So if you think of it that way, that's another story that if we were still going to write a story about the Holocaust, we could use that as an example, just like this story of Balaam. So who is the?
There are many of them. Yeah.
Yeah, there are tons of them. That's right. So it's just so we have to. There are two ways of looking at it, and I think that this is, after we've looked at all the hardships and like that, well, now, despite everything, you're still beautiful. You're great. You can do tremendous things, not only as a people or a nation, but as yourself.
וכאשר יענו אותו כנרבה וכנפרוץ. That's what we say in Pesach, The more they are mistreated, or they are going to grow. And they is us.
So let's see, we never read the prophecy yet. It's okay. So we ought to read some of that. And who's
I'll
up for
read.
reading verses 15 all the way through the end of 24?
I'll
Kent,
take
you're
that,
on.
Marty. You bet. He took up his theme and said, Word of Balaam, son of Beor, word of the man whose eye is true, word of him who hears God's speech, who obtains knowledge from the Most High, and beholds visions from the Almighty, prostrate, but with eyes unveiled. What I see for them is not yet. What I behold will not be soon. A star rises from Jacob. A scepter comes forth from Israel. It smashes the brow of Moab, the foundation of all children of Seth. Edom becomes a possession. Yea, Seir a possession of its enemies, but Israel is triumphant. A victor issues from Jacob to wipe out what is left of Ur. He saw Amalek, and taking up his theme, he said, a leading nation is Amalek, but its fate is to perish forever. He saw the Kenites, and taking up his theme, he said, though your abode be secure, and your nest be set among cliffs, yet shall Cain be consumed when Asher takes you captive. He took up his theme and said, alas, who can survive except God has willed it? Ships come from the quarter of Kittim. They subject Asher, subject Eber. They too shall perish forever. Then Balaam set out on his journey back home, and Balak also went his way.
Okay. So, any comments?
I
Go ahead.
please, Ed,
Go ahead, Kent.
this morning, as most mornings, I tuned in to the latest news on the hostage release from Israel. And this morning's of three men who have been were taken captive and abused, and for what 450 some days. They looked gaunt. They looked like pictures of Holocaust survivors from the death camps.
Mhm.
And I read this, and it's hot. I feel like this speaks to me today, to the situation, and where I'd want God's will to be done the same today as it was then, or prophesized to be done then, to show no quarter for those murderers and terrorists and rapists that did that to our people. That's all I want to say. And I see that here in this section, in that poetry.
Good words. Yes, Rabbi. I thought I saw your hand up, or
Not mine.
not yours. Okay.
Incense.
Anyone else have any comments about what we've read?
You know, one of the things that came to my mind as we are talking about it is that there was aware of God about before October 7th. And there was no listening to it. There was the word of God before November 20, and there was no listening. So we can talk about this. This happens with the prophets that come in the future, that they were told about things, but they were not listening. There was no faith, as Marty was saying, in what Rabbi Norm called as an insight or a conscience. There was avoiding listening, listening. And let's say that instead of Bilam, those words of God went directly to the people, although Rab Norman said we don't hear from them. We talk about the very thin voice of God. And so it's an interesting way of looking at things, that some people see the future and some don't. I called the name. I call those that prophesize that we need to take care of the climate as prophets, and we are not listening. So there is that discrepancy. And we can talk about, okay, fine, you didn't listen, but eventually we'll be okay. So there is a lot of human nature going on here in these speeches, is this neum, is these words that coming up that make me think very much about the power of, if you want, the word of God coming through this guy. I was thinking about, I always call Al Gore as a prophet. And that's, in my mind, that's the type of prophet that you see a situation, you tell about it, and people don't listen. So anyway, that was my neum, my speech.
It's okay. It's all right. Any other comments? I see some thoughtful hands, that you can keep it up there. You don't have to put it down. But there's some gears working there about what we're discussing. So what is it? So is this Pollyannic? Or is there a catch here somewhere?
What's that word, Marty?
Oh, everything's going to be great. Everything's going to be great. You don't have to worry. I'm always going to be around. Or is there a catch somewhere? Yes, go ahead. Amy.
Well, I've had this conversation with Rabbi Norm before. There have been prophets all through the Bible, and I've asked Rabbi Norm, how do you know that this is a genuine prophet or someone just expounding on his own opinion?
That's right.
You don't know if it's God inspired or not.
That's a hard one.
Well, I imagine
Yeah.
lots of people in the biblical days didn't know how to discern whether the words were from God or not.
We still don't know.
Right. And historically, most people don't listen.
Historically, you're right. And you mentioned, about prophecy. Are you willing to wait and see if the prophecy is true? Well, sometimes you die before any evidence.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
Hey,
where the problem lies.
So
That's
what
right.
do you do? How do you know?
So
the issue is listening. The issue is listening and analyze for yourself. I think that taking the word of a prophet or whoever will be just at set value, it will be very childish. And as Marty said, it will be too. I mean, for example, in Jeremiah analysis of the enemies that are coming, just look, open your eyes. You're not a prophet, but listen, pay attention, analyze, synthesize, use your brains.
I think what Rabbi Mary said is an important one. I can only speak about, and each one of us can only speak to this based on their own personal experiences,
Right.
and what they've read, what they, things that happen in their lives, things like that. But if you do have to know, you can't always make the assumption. Remember, this is all based on a covenant between God and the Israelites. We're the Israelites today, okay? So that's where the term loyalty comes in. Do you have a loyalty to God? Or do you have, or whatever God may mean to you? Remember, your image is your personal image. It does not necessarily mean that the next person will have that same image of God. And I don't mean what you see in your mind, but what God can do and everything else. And yes, go ahead, Amy.
I think one of the things that really concerns me in the Christian world, there are some mega churches, and they're being led by quote unquote God-fearing pastors
Mm-hmm.
and leaders. And some of them are the gospel according to that particular preacher and not entirely Bible based.
Mhm.
And
But that's true.
got
That's human nature. That's right.
thousands and thousands of people believing and following them, genuinely
That's right.
thinking that they're speaking as a messenger from God, and they are not.
Mhm.
Um,
Incidentally, let it be said,
Excellent point.
it happens in the Jewish community too.
Absolutely.
Okay,
One of the things that might be a criterion is, are they following the good, right behavior as outlined in the Ten Commandments? Okay. How you interact with other people, how you, there's some people, I think of some of those pastors that have gotten to a point where they said, I'm just like Balak. I'm so great, I can charge more for my services.
Right.
mhm.
Okay.
Well,
And
and there's some feel-good ministries that are tremendously
but everyone wants to feel good.
Mhm.
well, yeah, but
That's right. But what do they do good?
we need the truth.
Yeah.
Good or bad, we
Yeah,
we
that's right.
need the word of God and not the word of any individual. And the discernment can be very
Mhm.
blurred.
That's where the work comes in. That for each one of us,
Right.
Yeah,
you
you're
know.
right, Amy.
So, Rabbi, I think you wanted to say something. Wrong hand. Okay. Okay, go ahead,
Go ahead, Rabbi.
Marianne. Rabbi, did you want to say
no, go
something?
ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I can see what Amy is saying. And I think part of that problem is they, and I will never put down the Gospels of Christ because I think they're incredible, but they only focus on one aspect. They very rarely go back to anything in the Torah or what they would call the Old Testament. So there's a big chunk of information that's missing between what was written and Sunday morning. And I can see, I'm very familiar with Amy's point of view there, that there are a lot of things left. They're not clear in their presentation. I have walked out of places like that, just said to my friend, I'm out of here, because it was so bizarre. And to my mind, in my experience, so against everything that they claimed to teach was not what they were preaching, and just got up and left. So yeah, I think sometimes there is a problem with pride, with ego, with who's the boss kind of thing, that I think God is for all people,
Mhm.
regardless of
Mhm.
who you are or where you are. And he speaks to people in a way that they can understand in their culture, in their mind.
Well said.
Yeah,
It's a good way of looking at it. Yes.
Yeah. If I can add one more thing,
Sure,
Um,
Suzanne.
Yeshua quoted from Deuteronomy. Well, he quoted from the Torah, but mostly from Deuteronomy. And I find it ironic that so many pastors just kind of ignore that. And you can't understand what he was trying to convey unless you understand the Torah.
Good point.
It's so fundamental. I mean, I know
Mhm.
this is more to, to my religious beliefs than yours, but, for the fact that we're joined together, we're the branch and you're the root, the trunk, um, and so if you don't acknowledge and learn from the basics, then you're just lacking. You're just so lacking.
All right. Rabbi, you're on.
And David wanted to say,
Oh, okay. I missed your hand. It
No,
was
okay.
too timid.
All right.
Okay.
This is way off the subject. I really wanted to say this before we ended our session. Going back to the very beginning when you started talking about Ine Motova Manayim, it started to remind me in my brain about a movie I saw many, many, many years ago when I was a lot younger. It was called Raid on Entebbe. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with that movie, but there's a scene when all of the commandos are in the plane going off to make the rescue of the hostages. And one person near the back of the plane starts to sing quietly, Ine Matovu Manayim. And before he gets to it, everyone in the plane is singing that in harmony. And I just wanted to tell you how meaningful that was when you brought it up this morning. It brought me back to that wonderful moment.
Very good, David. Very, very profound. Rabbi.
I appreciate the honesty and the passion with small p behind the concerns about some of the churches and the pastors that we're talking about. But indeed, it has happened and continue to happen in the Jewish community as well.
Yeah.
So let it not be understood by anyone as an indictment of other religions when we can just as easily speak to about ourselves and the sins and the misrepresentations that come from some of our own leaders. The other thing that I wanted to go back just to the previous kind of thing when Marty was talking about the legitimacy or the authenticity of a prophetic message, and how do we know and what do we do and do we need to sit and wait? Last night I quoted Pirkei Avot of Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor. It's not incumbent upon us to make sure that everything happens. On the other hand, we can't cop out. We can't
Right.
abstain for our role in making the world better and doing our part. So I think again, I think that's also part of the central response to that question, for which there's no really satisfying answer. Is we don't necessarily know the validity or the authenticity of a prophetic message, and it's fine to speculate, and it's fine to argue and dissent and discuss and quote and whatever. But in the meanwhile, as Rabbi Miri was saying, in the meanwhile, we're destroying the world. In the meanwhile, there's poverty and there's illness. In the meanwhile, there's still war and destruction. What are we doing about that?
Right.
And I think that's the central message of the Jewish tradition.
That's right. I would agree. I think all of us would agree with that, because if we all kept that in mind every day and did our little bit to try to make the world a little better, tikkun olam. Okay. Just saying hi to everyone as you walk past. You know, hi, how you doing today? Even if it seems trite, the answer is going to usually be, oh, I'm doing fine. But once in a while, you hear it's not so good today.
But you made it a little bit better by acknowledging me.
That's right. That's why I like to wear shirts with these jokes many times, because I just that one little thing that it doesn't take a lot of doing, because you see that person smile and you know, for that moment, it changed their day.
Mhm.
But your neighbor is ill, calling up, see how they're doing, or sending a text message or an email, whatever. These are the things that are important. It's not building an edifice. That's what Torah is about. At least the way I interpret it. It was meant for people who didn't have a home. Didn't have, they had to make themselves a home. They had to make for themselves a nation. Not, they had to do it, not just talk it. And that's, in today's world, it's very easy to be a talker, a texter, go on TikTok, go on, whatever source, media source. No, it's not what you say, what you're doing with your own two hands, or, and some people may not be able to do something, so charitable donations, whatever. But that little bit goes a long way in the scheme of things.
Of course. Thank you, Marty.
Yes.
And you're absolutely correct in all you've shared, and
That's the
Rabbi
story.
Norm and Rabbi Murray. And for a beleaguered people historically, and time and again had to rise from ashes,
Mm-hmm.
the first order of business, second order of business, first being is belief
Right.
in Hashem. The next order of business is survival.
Mm-hmm.
Is that is being able to live to do the mitzvot that you speak of. And if we can't do that, there will be no mitzvot, at least from Jews, from Israelites, from the us that Rabbi Mary speaks of. So that's my take on it in today's society, but also as I look back throughout the Tanakh and our history and Haman and Passover and the Purim and all that.
Yeah.
It's like, how are you going to survive and deal with evil, pure evil? And that's part of the equation. For me, it is.
Okay. I have an answer, but I've got to, because I've had this discussion many times this month. Yes, Marianne,
Well,
please.
I think it sums up to actions speak louder than words.
Yes.
That you can be the most incredible biblical scholar who's ever lived, but if God lives in your head and not your heart, you may as well be studying auto mechanics. That you have to put this into a real action on a day by day basis.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be grand and glorious. I think, like Kent was saying, just be nice to people.
Yeah.
Hold the door open. Say please, thank you. I think that sometimes people just make it complicated.
Good point. Amy?
Really quick question. Do the Jews believe in the number 666 the same as the non-Jews do?
Not me.
I can only speak for myself. I don't know of anyone who does.
No.
That's all I can say, that I know.
I do.
But I don't know.
I know of people, but no, I don't. And I don't think mainstream, I don't
It's not,
think
yeah.
No.
would
Yeah.
say.
Only when I'm in a movie theater. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, we had that discussion way back years ago when Torah study was held at the temple, Amy, because I had asked, I don't remember what we were talking about, but I had that number had come up for some reason, and I had asked, well, didn't anybody see the movie The Omen? And everyone's looking at me like I have two heads. No one knew what I was talking about.
Probably was a page number or something.
It's absolutely terrifying. For
Well,
sure.
yeah, to you and me, it is a terrifying number.
Right.
Fortunately, well, I don't know your feelings on the rapture, but my feeling is we won't be here to see it, but because I'm a pre-trib person, but that's just me. But anyways, it is a terrifying number.
Okay. Okay, each his own.
Hold on a second. Hey, Marty, just one last word. I'm reminded as my dog speaks to me of what Mark Twain wrote about things you said about kindness and just is that he said, he wrote, always be kind. He says, it pleases most and confounds the rest. But everybody, Shabbat Shalom, and I thank you. Thank you, Marty, and
Oh.
thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Yeah,
I'll see you
Rabbi Noah,
later this
Rabbi
week.
Rick. Bye-bye.
Okay, see you, Rabbi, later this week.
Rabbi Norman, may I ask you, where'd he go? Oh, shoot.
Oh, he signed out.
I wanted to ask about the hostage in the temple.
I wish he were here. You do what you're referring to is the chair that
The chair, right.
with the and I honestly do not remember I know he mentioned it before, but I don't know the status at this point.
Does anybody know?
I believe he said last night that there was still no news.
No news.
That,
You know,
that's what I heard when he spoke about that there's
Okay.
no news about what's happening with that.
you do realize that in this trade, that the recent trade, that 49 of the people that were returned to to Israel had already been dead for some time,
Yeah.
and they were in exchange for live people.
No,
Okay.
we want also the
But
dead bodies.
but I'm saying that
Yeah.
what was it, 10 to 1? I don't
Right,
remember what the
right.
number was, 100 to 1.
Right.
It's
Right.
but they were
Right.
counting, the Hamas people were counting even a dead person as being returned in exchange for 100 people.
They're hard. There's no negotiating with evil. I mean,
I
that's the
know, but
bottom line.
it's a horrible
Okay.
situation.
Yeah.
You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. It's
Yeah.
that's true.
Well, let's have faith and pray for them.
That's
There's
what
no
you do.
much else to do.
That's what you do.
Okay, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat
everybody.
Shalom.
Shalom.
And no, we don't meet next week. There's a Sabbath service next
Yeah.
week, as the rabbi mentioned. So I'll see you in 2 weeks.